So in this video we're going to assemble one of our FBG grow houses. Now these are the packages you'll receive from the carrier. You will get 3 packs of glass. These are in these flat packages here. With the glass, the best thing to do is put them out of the way until we get to the point where we need to put the glass into the grow house. But also when you actually have them delivered, just give them a shake. It is tough and safety glass. If any panes are broken, it will go into little tiny pieces. So shake the box, see if it rattles. If it does, open it up and then we can replace any sheets of glass that are broken. But this packaging is very good for making sure that it arrives with you all in one piece. So the other packages we've got are the long parts. You can see on here we've got a package which has got tubes in it. That's the aluminium rails that we will use for the shelves in the grow house. This rectangular box here has got all of the long parts in there because the grow house is 4 feet long, 1.2 meters long. And then the package that's strapped to it on the back are the back parts, because the grow house is available either as a lean-to version which is screwed to the wall, which we call a wall frame, or as a grow house which is freestanding, and these are the parts that make it into the grow house. So this is all the back fittings in here. And the other package that we get that we're going to open up first is the parts box, which is this package here. This has got the instructions in there, it's got all the nuts and bolts, and it's got all the small components. So we're going to open that first and we'll go through the bits and pieces that we'll find in there. So this is the parts box. Inside here we've got, first of all, the instructions. So you might want to have a look at those before you assemble the frame. We've also got some handles for the glass that allows us to slide the front panels of glass backwards and forwards. These are the liners. These sit in the aluminium channel and allow us to slide the glass smoothly to open the doors. So we'll come across using those in a little while when we do the glazing. Pack of nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts are, the bolts are stainless steel, the nuts are aluminium, so very sturdy. And then we've got the smaller parts that we're going to use first of all, because the first thing we're going to do is assemble the end. These 2 pieces in the bottom here are end plates. They look rather green at the moment. That's because they've got a protective film on them. We'll take the film off when we actually assemble them, but that's for assembling the end. So the first thing we're going to do is use these parts and some long rails out of the rail pack to assemble the 2 ends of the grow house. So to make the end up, the instructions tell you which parts that you need to get out. So I've got out parts that I need for one end, and it also tells you how many nuts and how many bolts you need out of the bag. So what I've done is I've counted my nuts and my bolts out so that I know I've got enough parts to make the frame. Now the first thing we do is put the long rails next to each other, and very quickly we're building up the actual shape of the end of the frame. And then we've got 2 cross rails. This is the bottom cross rail. We know it's the bottom one because it's got a flat piece on there for going on the ground and providing it with stability. And there's holes already punched in here, so we're just literally lining up with the holes that we've got in the vertical leg. And then the other piece that's going to go across is what we call the centre rail. Now it is important with the centre rail to make sure that you put it on the right way round. The deeper channel is at the bottom and the shallower channel is at the top. And this is the top end, and you can see here we've got an angle for the roof, because obviously we want a slope on the roof for the rain to fall off. There's a little tongue in there that just locks those 2 together. So we've slotted that in, and now we've got the basic shape. We're just going to bolt it together. So we have 8 nuts and bolts. We just put the bolt through the 2 pieces of metal, and the nuts are nice and chunky so you can hold them easily in your fingers. And on the inside of the channel there's a little slot so that the nuts can't turn. So we don't need a spanner, we just use a screwdriver just to tighten them up. So that's the first one done. At this stage we're just wanting to nip them up because we will square the frame up a little bit later on, so you don't want to over tighten your nuts and bolts. So what I'm going to do is put the other 8 nuts and bolts into the holes, and then once I've done that I'll make the other end, and then we can start putting the long rails onto the frame. So the next thing we want to add once we've done the 2 ends are the long rails, and the instructions tell us that the first rail we want to add is the centre rail, which is the one that goes here. So I've counted out some nuts and bolts and I've got my 2 ends. I'm just going to get my centre rail and then we're going to fit that. Now when you put the long rails on, if you have got somebody that can help you, that is really helpful, but I'm just going to do it on my own. So the best way if you're doing it on your own is just to hold the framework at an angle. Now again, when we did the centre rail at the end, I said you need the deeper channel at the bottom. We need the deeper channel at the bottom on here as well. So I've got that in the right orientation, and there's a drawing on the instructions just to make sure that we know exactly how we're doing it. And all we've got to do is, again, with the 10mm bolts that we had before, just put a couple of 10mm bolts in, and then with my screwdriver we just put a nut on the inside, and if we get this first one on, then the framework will start to become a little bit more rigid. So just nip it up at the moment. I'll just put the other nut on this end. Again, these chunky nuts are held in the channel, so you don't need to fiddle about with a spanner at all. It's literally just a case of using a screwdriver. So there we are, that's that end done. And now just bring this in like that, and I'll bolt that end up as well, and then when I've done that I'll put the kick rail on, because that's a very similar process, and then we'll then have a look at the 2 top rails. So I've just put the grow house up right now, and we're going to fit the front rail. Now the front rail is just going to go across there like that, but the front rail, instead of using the 10mm bolts that we've been using previously, has to use a 20mm bolt, because we've got, remember that tongue that we had at the very beginning when we fitted the top leg into the front leg? We've got that and the top leg material, and now the front rail material. So we've got 3 pieces of aluminium. So we just have a slightly longer bolt, and that just drops through there. I'm just going to do the other end, and then again it's just the same standard chunky nut on the inside. So I'll put the 2 nuts on and tighten this up, and then we'll just talk about the ridge rail at the back, because there's something slightly different about that. So it's just the ridge rail to put on now, and it's the ridge rail that's going to tie in this top leg and this back leg. So it's the ridge rail that's providing the strength at this apex of the grow house. So 10mm bolt in there as usual, and then chunky nut on the inside, and then just tighten that up with our screwdriver. Now the chunky nut on here, and all the chunky nuts that we've done so far, have been held in the channel, so you haven't needed a spanner. The back leg here is slightly different, because on here it is possible for the nut to spin, so you do just need to, when you're tightening it up, just keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't spin round and round. If it does start to spin and you can't hold it with your finger, just get a screwdriver and just pop it in there to hold it, just to stop it going around. Okay, that's tightened up now, so that's the top rails done, and we can move on. So we put the long rails on. We're now going to put the end infill plates on. These go at the 2 ends, and they just hold the top sheet end glass in place and fill in the triangular bit at the end. So the first of the infill plate bolts is fairly straightforward. 10mm nut and bolt like we've been using already. 10mm bolt up through that top one there and through the leg, and then the nut on the inside, and just tighten that up. Doesn't need to be too tight because again, you know, in a little while when we're glazing the frame we're going to be sliding a sheet of glass behind here. So I'll just nip that up with a screwdriver, and I'll come on to the other two bolting places because they're slightly different in terms of what we have to do. So for that, 10mm nut, 10mm bolt, but in addition to the 10mm nut and the 10mm bolt, we've also got this little white nylon spacer, and that's to give us a little bit of gap for the glass. So with this hole here and this hole here, we first of all put the bolt through, and then on the inside of the bolt, before it goes through the leg, we put that white nylon spacer on, and so that will just give us a little bit of clearance for the glass to slide in. Nut on the inside just as before, and then just nip it up with a screwdriver. Now you'll notice that on the other end we've got two holes close together. It is the outside one that we want to do because that's where it lines up with the leg, and again a white spacer on before just to do that. I'll do the other end, and then we'll be ready to move on to the back of the frame.